Sponsored by Paradigm Lost. Affordable gaming accessories with a twist.
The legend tells of 3 mystic crystals fated with lack of knowledge. Only the 3 mages, Professor Dex from Phoenix, D20 from Cleveland, and Lore from the Forgotten Realms, have the knowledge to replenish these crystals. This is the DM Toolbox, Tales from the Edge.
We got this.
Hello, character sheets, and welcome back to DM Toolbox. Don't forget, we're your hosts, Professor Dex, Lore, and myself. I actually forgot my name for this episode. D20. I thought it was D20, but I just had a session, and then I'm doing this, and I got another session. I'm just amped up today.
You are hyped.
I am hype with a Y. Oh, man.
So, how's it going? How was your game?
Man, I got to play with my niece and nephew for the first time. They were level 7 characters, okay? And it was just so cool to see, people below the age of 25 playing D&D. Watching kids play, it's almost like, you don't want to talk down to them. You know what I'm saying? But sometimes there are more complex of an issue that you need to simplify.
Mm-hmm. I ran a kids group for 5 years, and I'd say something like, "Oh man, you got this Gauss rifle." Now that's a mispronunciation of, Gauss, who actually did a lot of he did a lot of science with magnetism, and anyway, not the point. The point is kids, they are an amazing window into the role-playing world. And you get to see them grow and develop not only as people, but as gamers, as role players. Are they a dice goblin? Are they just like, I only need the necessities kind of person? Are they, I gotta have everything. And not only that, I gotta have every item in the game. I need the Vorpal sword. That's like their one goal. And then once they get all that stuff, you can see them grow. They're like, oh, well, okay, I don't need that anymore. I got it. Yeah. What else can I do? Yeah. And at that point, you start seeing their characters develop. They start making characters. And not just, one character that's a fighter and one character that's a ranger. No, they have, shout out to my guy Gus. He's in college now. I'm so proud of him. But one of his first characters was Mark Pepper. All right, and he was just this cool anime dude. But he really loved this character, and I could see him grow with it. Mm-hmm. But that actually kind of brings us right into our topic for today, which is DM tools, player accessories, everything that you need to play a role-playing game.
Want and need.
That's a good point, because the thing is most of RPG systems, they don't require much. They require a paper and pencil. That's why they're called pen and paper games. Don't use pens.
Never use pens. Never use pens.
Always use pens.
So, number one reason why we say don't use pens is because you're going to be writing down a lot and you're going to be erasing a lot. What can't you do with a pen? Can't erase a pen. And no, I'm not talking about the 1989 pens that had erasers on them that smeared across the page. We're just making it easy on you, and making it easy on you. Use a pencil. If you mess up, erase it, mark it out, and it'll just be a lot easier for you to read your notes as opposed to, cross this out. It's almost like you could think of a pen as, like, etching it in to the paper. You wrote a 13. It will be a 13 forever.
The only pen that should ever be used on your character sheet is a red one.
Ooh. And why is that?
Well, you see, the dreaded red pen is the pen of death.
No. What happened to Hex
I
Reaver?
thought you were going to grade my character sheet. I'm like, no. You don't get to do that.
You get D for dead.
No, that's when you just get a stamp. When you just stamp the crap out of the paper. It's like, here, you can have
Well,
it back.
not everybody has a laser cutter like Professor Dex does, so we gotta go with low tech.
I'm Professor Dex, and I have all the fancy toys.
Indeed, I have an entire Wonderland Emporium. I call the laboratory. It's full of all kinds of things that make accessories, but we'll talk about that later.
Okay.
Sponsored. It's a sponsored episode.
Shameless plug.
What was that? Did you guys hear something? All right. So, guys, what do you need to play a role-playing game?
I'm going to raise my hand.
I select you.
I need dice. I need pencils out the wazoo.
Mm-hmm.
And I need a creative imagination.
Well, hold on. That's a lot to unpack. Woo! What kind of dice? Like Yahtzee dice?
I need I need 20-sided polygonal dice. And 10-sided. And 8-sided. And 4-sided. And 6-sided. For I am not just a dice goblin. For I am a dragon.
I think we need a little bit more lore on this.
So what you're looking for is a set of polyhedral dice.
Dice-agonal?
It's not necessarily wrong. They are polygons, but
Yeah. So a set of 7 polyhedral dice would include a D20, a 20-sided die,
Me.
a D12, 12-sided die, a D10, and a percentile dice. They look the same, except for one has 2 digits on each face, because you roll them together and they add up to from 1 to 100. Then you have a D8, a D6, and a D4. And then, of course, you can always have super fancy ones and have like, oh, I have a D3, and I have a D7. I have a D2. It's a coin.
and there's an interesting backstory behind that. Let's dive into the history of these shapes real quick. Actually, why are these shapes used? It's because they are considered fair in physics. It means that no side is more likely to be landed on than any other. These are called isohedrons. And what they are is they are these sort of elemental shapes. There's actually only so many of them. There's some weird ones too. Odd number ones, believe it or not. But these shapes are considered the most fair, and it goes all the way back to the Greeks. Because there was this guy, and he was really into math. Really, really into math. And it goes all the way up from this Pythagoras guy all the way up to Euclidean. And that's where we get Euclidean geometry from. You may have heard it non-Euclidean geometry before from H.P. Lovecraft and things like that. That's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about these very special shapes, and we've been using them for a very long time. In fact, all the way back to the Greeks, the Egyptians, all of them, they had a D20 with numbers and letters on it. We're not entirely sure what game that was played with it, but maybe it was role-playing. Anyway, the interesting thing about these shapes is that they are, in mathematics, they are considered pristine. They are considered perfect. In fact, they are related to how music was created. Pythagoras basically invented music as we know in Western culture, not in other cultures, but mainly in Western culture. Why our music in Western culture sounds so different is because we base things off of harmony. And so there was this, actually, shameless plug here, on my DM screen there is something called Metaton's Isohedrons. It's actually not called that, forgive me. But that shape is supposed to be in harmony with the universe and with the music, all of the different tones. And it's interesting because almost all of the dice that we use in role-playing are those shapes. There's only one that isn't. It's the D10. That damn D10. But the rest of them are. And I just wanted to bring that up because it actually is an interesting tie-in to dice and what we use.
Okay. So we have our D20, and not all tabletop RPGs use the traditional system. With the D20, there's some that primarily use D10s. There's some that primarily use D6s. And one thing that a lot of people don't realize, when we say, well, what is a D20? D stands for die, and the number next to it stands for the amount of sides are on that die. So when you say a D20, that is a 20-sided die. A D6 is a 6-sided die. Everyone who has ever played Yahtzee, Monopoly, craps, basically every single board game has used a D6, a 6-sided die. And it surprises people because they don't realize that. They don't realize that that's what it's air quotes called. But a D6 is the most popular die in the world. So as we're saying, the things that we want, things that we need to play a tabletop RPG. So I did a lot of talking. Professor Dex did a lot of talking. Lore, what do you need at your table to enjoy a tabletop RPG?
Well, you have to have a player's handbook or the reference guide for the game.
Now, is that a luxury?
No,
or a necessity?
That is a necessity.
Okay.
You have to have at least one copy of it. Otherwise, how do you make a character?
Question for you, Lore. Are you speaking to players or DMs right now?
Both, actually. Because the player's handbook has all of the basic rules for how the game is played. Whenever I was running a D&D boot camp, I would tell people who were interested in DMing, I'm like, well, the first two things you need to get, aside from like dice and pencils and all the little accessories, whatever, you need a player's handbook, and especially for D&D, you need the monster manual. Because the player's handbook teaches you how to play the game, and the monster manual teaches you how to run creatures in combat. Be it a wolf or be it a 20th level archmage who can look at you and just be like, you're dead. You need both of them. So.
And again, our fans know that in general we're speaking of Dungeons and Dragons, yeah. But to make it more broad, do all games have a monster manual? For example, I like playing Savage World. I don't know if Savage Worlds has a monster manual.
No, that's why specifically for D&D they have a monster manual, but I know for like Savage Worlds they don't have one, Call of Cthulhu they don't have one, Dungeon World doesn't have one. It's all up to it's all up to the DM to create their own issues, their own stuff. But they need to have the basic rule book with them so that they can run a game correctly.
Okay.
I tend to agree with you on that, and there are. So here's the problem: is we're gonna have some character sheets out there that don't got the pocket change. They don't got the bread. They don't got the dough, and what I encourage you to do is find games that are free to play. There are games where you can download a free PDF of their player handbook. They're usually really simple, usually the light version. I know for a while GURPS usually had a light version for free. Mm-hmm. Honestly, it's the better version. Anyway, unless you like Crunch, which is doing a lot of math, the light version is usually better. So while we usually talk about D&D, it is important to point out not all games require you to buy the book. Nor do all games have the monster manual, like D20 was pointing out. However, some games like Savage Worlds, like you mentioned, rely on you getting the modules to have creatures and events and things like that. So typically, I'll be honest, if you're a first time DM or GM, Dungeon Master, Game Master, whatever you prefer to call yourself, I would definitely recommend picking up a module. It's kind of like a dry run of how to run the game, especially if you're not really experienced in DMing. But on the other hand, I've also seen a lot of people jump into DMing and just ride that horse like they were born to do it.
I hate everything you just said, but you're right. Like, I hate modules. Everyone that knows me know I hate modules. Mm-hmm. Because my imagination just explodes. They have to go to the Batcave to see the monster. No! Go to the waterfall. It's cooler than the Batcave.
Yeah.
Just go to the waterfall. So that's what my brain does. But I'm not going to sit here and lie and say I won't read. One thing that I like to do is I like to buy cheap modules from other games. Mm-hmm. I'm talking $3 to $7 for a module, and adapt it. And in doing so, it gives me a base. I call it the skeleton to work on. And move out from there. So you don't have to run the module verbatim. I suggest you not run a module verbatim. Put your own spin on it. For example, Lore, you like to run a module called Curse of Strahd.
I wouldn't call it a module, but that's my whole thing.
Yes.
But yes, so one of the pre-made storylines that Wizards of the Coast came out with for D&D is called Curse of Strahd. It's one of my favorite ones to run just because it's different from most other things. It's still fantasy, whatever, but it's also gothic horror, which is just fun.
Right. So if I played a Strahd game, start to finish, rules as written, the next time I play that Curse of Strahd game, I'm going to expect the exact same thing to happen. But instead of starting out in a carriage, I'm at a business office? What is happening? This is cool. Oh, wait a minute. I received a fax saying that someone in a nearby corporation needs assistance in a city called Barovia. That's what I mean by putting your own spin on it. The exact same story. Just put your own spin on it. That's what makes it your own, and that's what makes your players come back to you and be like, I like the way you DM. I want to play with your table even more.
And that's how you win at role-playing games.
There you go.
And see, the thing is it's all about bringing people together. Mm-hmm. Because it's not about the story. It's not about... Your players kind of write the story. We kind of direct it as the GM, as the DM. And you can play Curse of Strahd 1,000 times and have 1,000 different stories to tell. Because the thing is when we kind of sit around the fire and when we talk about what we had fun with, we're telling our epic story to other adventurers. We're telling, what our players did to other DMs. But what did I just say? You're telling what our players did.
Yeah.
You see, that's the thing. Your players are going to talk about that epic, they just cut off Strahd's head with like two-handed axes and just whoosh, head gone. And, they've never seen that before. They've never done that before. And that's the best, the best version of the module they've ever played. But that's what brings everybody together is our individual stories.
Yes. And I wanted to piggyback off that think about it. Think about it. No one tells stories about how they succeeded.
Yeah, about the
All
end.
the stories are about how they failed, how they messed up and came back from it. I mean, that's what every single YouTube channel is about. This is what happened. And then we got to the princess, and she turned out to be a drider, and we've been paying her this whole time. You know what I'm saying? No one says, yes, and then we got to Strahd and we defeated him. It was wonderful. It's a boring story. I don't want to hear that. I want to hear the fact that everyone was taken down and you had one hit left on him. He had 1 hit point. You rolled and you missed. And the entire campaign was over because it was his turn next. And then the DM was like, I'm going to move 5 feet away. You can have a shot on me. It's like, don't pander to me. This is a real story. That's my dude Puffin Forrest. Real story. You know what I'm saying?
You hear the dice clatter. Critical fail?
Let's see. +3. That's a 1?
I wrote this story for weeks. I'm not ending it here. Oh, the pain. I know.
It's always fun when I have my roommate who played with me one time. It's like, yeah, I still hate that you killed my character with an exploding cake.
Wow.
He's got plenty of cake. Anyway, stop giving him cake. All right. So, anyway, last thing that I think, just to get back on track, what the DM really needs. We did say paper before, but I think a notebook is really going to serve the DM better. Now, I played years without a notebook, but when I started using one, my games got a lot better. I sort of leveled up as a DM. Well, you don't need it per se, but you're really going to thank yourself if you use one. It's going to keep your ideas organized.
So you use your notebook for ideas?
Not just ideas, but I will put down kind of a basic outline of what I want my story to be. I will take notes down. Okay, so they talked to the bar wench this time, and that she's gonna rat them out to the thieves guild and all that other that kind of stuff you can put in notes that you don't necessarily want to share with your players.
Right.
And so the DM's notebook is sacred. Players do not get to look at it.
Players don't even know it exists.
Yeah. Well, you might have it out on the table and using it while you're playing game. Heck, I even use mine to keep track of monster HP sometimes because I'll just make a monster up on the spot.
You know what? I'm glad you said that. I'm glad you said that. So one thing, because I'm a nerd, I've started purchasing were initiative trackers.
I saw that.
Yeah.
So they're their own separate notebooks that you can take right down the battle. You know what I'm saying? Get everyone's name, everyone's initiative, and instead of going like having a very sloppy notebook and be like, it's more of a its own book, So that's just one thing that I do. I think
it does really help because after a while, you just get pages of what are these numbers called? oh yeah, I know what that is.
Yeah.
But see, there's actually other things. Tracking information in RPG games. Oh, it's very difficult. I mean,
it is.
That's the reason why we said don't use pens.
Yeah.
Because you got ammo, You have health. You have initiative. You have inspiration. Yeah, I mean, I could just go down a laundry list of things you need to keep track of. And there's accessories for all of that stuff.
Yeah.
There's HP trackers. There's custom character sheets that look really cool that you buy, and then you use 5 of them, and then they're gone unless you photocopy them, which you're not supposed to, but, you know, most people do that.
Seriously, you're not supposed to photocopy character sheets?
Mm-mm.
Really?
They're copyrighted.
They're copyrighted.
Go to jail, y'all!
So, yeah, I mean, you know, there's actually a lot of cool stuff. I make a lot of that stuff because honestly, it's not that available in retail stores. It's almost exclusively found online.
You know what, though? As we're talking about character sheets, I think a certain company sells 5 character sheets for like $20.
Oh, yeah. But, you know, keep in mind, though, that it's not just a character sheet that's from the D&D manual. These are things that have beautiful artwork on them, usually. I've seen some of them. There's like this Kraken one I saw. It was absolutely gorgeous. Is it $20 to me? I mean, I'm cheap.
Yeah.
I spend my money on lasers and chemicals and all kinds of stuff. Laboratory stuff, science stuff. That's where my money goes.
But see, I'm glad you brought that up. Because we were talking about, you know, some of our character sheets may not have that much money. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. One thing that I love about D&D that I don't really like about other games is you buy the player's handbook and you're good. You know what I'm saying? Yes, they come up with supplements to increase the value, but you could still play the game with just the player's handbook, you know? And then with the character sheets, my mind is being blown because you can't copy a character sheet. You know, you go through so many. Mm-hmm. You know, you go through so many. And you're going to be erasing and adding and erasing and adding because, like, you level up your characters. So your dexterity was a 12. Now it's a 14. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. And all the skills are affected, so you got to erase all those and add that in. So I really like D&D format that you buy one book. Like, you can buy the player's handbook and be good for the rest of your life.
Mm-hmm. I actually can one-up you on that one.
Okay.
GURPS. So GURPS, you can do GURPS Lite. That's free PDF. And let's talk about another accessory. A digital one in this case.
Okay.
Character generators. Character generators are one of the most valuable things as a player and as a DM. You can make NPCs, monsters, all kinds of stuff with character generators. The problem with D&D is you will be hard-pressed to find one that is free. Where, I will say with GURPS, it's actually more openware, community-supported. Steve Jackson, he wanted to make the game so as universal as possible. That's why it only requires D6s, 3 to be precise, which you can get out of pretty much any board game box.
Yeah.
And he did that on purpose because he wanted people to be able to play his game without having to. Originally, with D&D, you couldn't get a set of polyhedral dice anywhere. There was nowhere that you could buy. You had to buy the book or know that you could buy them in scientific catalogs. You know, like your science teacher had. In those catalogs, that's the only place, that's actually where they found them originally.
Yeah. And
they wanted them that way because it basically made their game exclusive to their property. And so Steve Jackson, who actually, you know, he had done lots and lots of RPGs at that point. He just wanted something simple that anybody could pick up just the book and maybe a spare Monopoly board in their house and play the game. So it's a lot like D&D in that aspect where you only need the player's manual, but because it's so community supported, pretty much everything with it is free. A lot of community has built even modules for free as well. to download the PDFs. But I will agree with you that D&D is very, very accessible.
Yeah.
But they got to lock down on all of the add-ons, all of the.
Yeah, I mean, like one thing, and I have 3 monster manuals that are not produced by Wizards of the Coast, because this is gonna sound weird. So let me explain. The more you play, the more you know. The more you fight a goblin, you're gonna know its armor class. You're gonna know its strength.
Mm-hmm.
You're gonna know its weaknesses.
Mm-hmm.
But when you place a chaos goblin, you've never heard of a chaos goblin before, so you don't know what to expect. And you're fighting a goblin. It's like, man, why is this goblin so hard? Oh, because it's a goblin chieftain, and not just a regular guy. Goblin chieftain? I've never heard of that before. Of course not, because you've been, studying the regular Dungeon Master guide so much, or the Monster Manual so much, you forgot that there's other stuff out there.
Shout out to my guys at GUI Cube, because that's exactly what they do. They have this whole world Zyathe that's just, it's more expansive than any D&D thing I've ever, any module I've ever looked at. It's huge, and it's absolutely massive. It's absolutely massive. They've got so much content coming out with giant maps and just different takes on stuff.
Okay. So while we're giving out shout outs, I guess give a shout out to Cobalt Press. So that's what I'm talking about.
Hell
Creature
yeah.
Codex, Tome of Beasts 1, Tome of Beasts 2. So
Awesome.
just want to get a little plug.
Yeah, we got a shout out to our community, because that's what this is all about. Is about the community.
Yep.
So let's move on to our a more significant subject here. And what do you guys think? What other stuff that's fancy that you might need? I mean, there's dice trays that you can roll your dice in. Character folios, GM screens. What the heck is a GM screen?
So, I'll let Lord take that. I feel I've been doing a lot of talking.
We got big mouths, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Basically, it's just a privacy screen for the GM to. It's whenever you see like pictures of people. Stop. Yeah. It's when you see pictures of people playing D&D, or you watch live streams of people playing D&D, you always see the DM sitting behind a screen. They always have something in front of them. It's just a place for them to keep their notes. It's a place to keep any references. It's a place for them to roll their dice in secret, so you don't know what they're rolling. A lot of times when I use mine and I'm rolling dice,